Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar on data capture. So many options. We really want to get into it today on the issue of data capture, and as the title suggests, the various options that are out there for you to look at for your operation. By way of introduction, my name is Jim O'Rourke, and I'm on the business development side of the house. And I am joined today by my colleague, Lynn Fern, subject matter expert.
Good morning, everyone.
So let's jump right into it in the heart of the matter here. And we'll start off by letting you a little bit know about ICG and who we are. Just for those of you who are not familiar with us, we're a solutions developer, a systems integrator, and consultant. So we do wear a number of different hats in building and delivering solutions to our clients. We've been in business since 1990, so certainly not new kids on the block. Our focus really is financial back office. So AP, AR, procurement, supply chain, all of those things that will comprise the back office. And we really do try to stick to our knitting and keep our solutions in that space. Another important point about how we do business is we are ERP agnostic and systems independent. So regardless of what kind of a back end financial system you're running, it doesn't matter to us. We're not aligned that way. We've developed and integrated solutions to all commercially available systems, as well as any number of homegrown systems as well. Diverse client base, just a short list here to show you, again, we're not vertically aligned in terms of who we do business with. Our client base spans, as you can see, quite an array of different industries, which I think brings us some unique experiences to the table, and having dealt with so many different industries and different people. We have a track record of delivering on return on investment, which I think is obviously most important to people who want to make sure when they do choose a solution and put it in, that they're going to get a bang for the buck. And we're also well known for being on time and on budget and delivering what we say when we say we're going to do it. So let's talk about data capture. So that's what we're here to talk about today. So data is the lifeblood, really, of any company, especially in this hyper-competitive business environment that we find ourselves today. As you all know, in dealing with data, it's very important that not only that you're able to collect data and analyze it and make business decisions, but that you have the right data. And there are a number of different ways of capturing that, and that's what we're going to get into today. And at this point, I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Lynn, and we'll get into some details here. Lynn?
Thanks, Jim. I'm going to start off by talking about the challenge that AP departments face. You all get transactions from vendors, but you can also get them from customers. And then a lot of you get transactions from company or from departments within your own organization. And these transactions can be paper-based. Yep, in today's day and age, paper still arrives. A lot of them come in through images, and those can come in through different mediums. We'll talk about that in a minute. And then finally, you've got transactions coming in electronically through electronic files or other means. And then to really drill down to see what this picture looks like, your vendors can send those invoices through the mail. They can also send emails in with PDFs or PNGs, whatever those images are. You can also have electronic file relationships, EDI relationships with your vendors. And also, vendors could send transactions in through portals or marketplaces. Looking at your customers, customers can also send you emails requesting payment for things. They can also do that through the mail. And most of the time, you can have electronic relationships with your customers, so those transactions may come in electronically. And then finally, when you talk about intercompany transactions, honest to gosh, it can still happen. They still send paper-based transactions through. They can send emails in, or your IT department may have created online forms for intercompany transactions for one department to charge another department. And then finally, you can have systems within your organization that pass transactions back and forth, but that then need to be processed by AP. And you can see from this picture that there's a lot going on, and it's hard for an AP department to make sure that they're doing the most efficient job they can at capturing all this information and keeping track of all of these transactions. Really, what we're saying is that one size doesn't fit all when you look back at that picture and that web of all the transactions. You need to understand where your data is coming from and understand what your goals are to then decide what tools are best for you. We work with our clients to do vendor stratification analysis. And what is that? We come in and we start to assess invoice volume. Invoice volume is important because depending on how many transactions you have coming through your organization, some tools may not be right for you, where others may be. And when we talk about invoice volume, we like to try to define things in low, medium, and high. Low being 1 to 10,000 transactions a month, medium being 10 to 50, and high being 50 or more. But I want to emphasize that we're not only talking about your total invoice volume, but you'll also hear us talk about the vendors being low, medium, and high transactions. This is really the overall picture for your organization, but the number of transactions by vendor also becomes important. Once you've assessed that invoice volume, you need to consider those incoming formats. Are they paper-based? Are they electronic? Are they coming in through emails? And then you need to figure out how you're receiving them. Do you have a marketplace? Do you have, what tools are at your disposal? What tools might your company be interested in, both from an AP perspective and others? And we pull all that together to then put together strategies specific to our clients. Now we're going to talk a little bit about some of the tools that I've referenced already, and these are the most common data capture tools out there. The first one is EDI. And I don't think I need to define it, but really it's the ability for two companies to exchange data through electronic files. Most common, there are purchase orders that go back and forth. There's acknowledgments, there's advanced shipping notices, and finally there's invoices through those 810 transactions. I want to go through the pros and cons of each of these tools. Certainly for EDI, it is the most cost effective for vendors with the highest transaction volumes. So if you've got a vendor that's sending in, 500 invoices a month or 1,000 invoices a month or something like that, EDI is by far the best tool because it is very reliable. Once you get that process set up, it runs. It's not perfect and there may be a problem here or there, but when you look at the number of transactions going through with the number of issues, it's the most reliable way to receive those invoices in. In addition, you also get maximum data density. And what that means is for the lowest cost, you get the most data in. You can get all of the lines of an invoice. You can get every piece of that invoice in and get that mapped over. Get that mapped over easily with workflow solutions. So if you've got a matching workflow, hypothetically, you can bring that data in and use that to then perform matching on those three-way PO invoices. And because it's so reliable, because you have the maximum data density, it really is the lowest cost to your AP department moving forward. Again, you get the most data with the lowest issue, but it's not without its cons. It is costly to implement. This is a larger initiative within an organization. And as such, it typically requires a lot of IT involvement, not only for the initial implementation, but also for the ongoing support and then for the vendor onboarding, because each vendor has to go through a technical onboarding process. Finally, one of the cons for EDI is not all vendors have EDI capabilities because it is costly to implement. Your smaller vendors are typically not going to have EDI capabilities. They're not going to be able to send you those transactions. So at the end of the day, EDI is a great tool and it should be used for vendors with the heaviest transaction volumes. But it's really not worth it if the number of transactions you're going back and forth with for a vendor is low.
Yeah, I would just emphasize there again. I think the main point Lynn's making it is not for everybody, and through that vendor stratification, you should be able to identify that. And one other thing I would emphasize is it also requires your IT department to have a certain level of sophistication. Certainly, we run into clients who may have the volume criteria to do EDI, but just aren't able to pull it off from really they just don't have that level of technical competency in their IT department. So just another thing to consider.
Thanks, Jim. Next up, we're going to talk about OCR. What is OCR? OCR is the ability to take an electronic image and takes the data off of that through a piece of software or set of softwares and some other intelligence-based functionality. Again, pros and cons. The pros with OCR is it is easy to implement and it is easy to integrate with workflow systems. There are products out there that have, that have their own workflows or can easily integrate in with other systems. One of the nice things about OCR is because it's easy to implement, it does provide benefit very quickly and also improves over time. When you initially go live with OCR, any extraction that's done provides value to your organization because that's data you and your group no longer have to key. One of the best things about it is you do get electronic capture, but it doesn't require any change management for your vendors. Vendors don't have to do anything different. Also, there's minimal IT involvement. So if you've got an IT department that's like many across that we come across, they're very busy with a lot of different initiatives and a lot of different priorities. And in OCR software doesn't require much involvement from them. And now let's look at the cons. The first one is high extraction confidence doesn't always equal high indexing confidence. And why is that important? It's not enough for the software to accurately pull the information from the page, but really what we need to do is pull the information from the page and make sure we assign it to the correct field in your ERP. One and perfect example is maybe through extraction, we pull off a dollar amount, and that dollar amount is $127. If the OCR software assigns that to the total invoice amount, but let's say it's the sales tax amount, then it doesn't do you any good. Someone still has to go in and correct that. So you not only need a software that can do the extraction with confidence, but also have the intelligence to assign it to the right field within your ERP. One of the other cons with OCR is it does not typically provide 100% of the data capture or the data that you need to process a transaction. One example there is payment method. Very rarely do vendors put the payment method on their invoice. That's something that typically has to be derived through vendor lookups or something like that. So that's just something to consider when going through and putting in OCR. Lastly, one of the cons is there is still ongoing AP costs because there might be gaps in the data like I just described, or you could have exceptions to the process, whether that has to do with the indexing confidence or the extraction confidence. So where should you use OCR? You should really use OCR for all the invoices that you can't get in to come electronically any other way. So perhaps you don't have an EDI relationship with the vendor, or, and I'll talk about this next, you can't get the invoice to come through a portal or a marketplace.
Yeah, a few comments here, Lynn, if you don't mind.
Mhm.
Certainly, OCR is a very interesting subject because when you talk to most people, particularly in an AP environment, and you talk about data capture, usually OCR is first thing that comes to mind. And as we talk to clients and talk to folks, it's also the area of the biggest frustration for a lot of the reasons that Lynn just discussed. People put these systems in, and I think their expectations for results, because of the indexing confidence versus the accuracy, they often come out disappointed because the high level of exceptions and the other costs that are involved. That doesn't necessarily have to be the case. And one of the things that's very important here, I think, is going back to Lynn's point, is that you thoroughly vet the solutions and the solution providers if you're looking at OCR solutions. It is particularly with AI now. It really is a phenomenal technology. It can do a lot of good. But again, the important thing is that you're extracting the right data, not just the accuracy levels, which is important. I'm not saying that's not important. Accuracy is an important factor, but getting the right data is much more important, so that you're paying the right vendors the right amounts, and you're not creating a large number of exceptions, which really will kill any cost savings. So vet those vendors you're looking at, make them do a proof of concept, give them a really representative sample from all your vendors and vendor types and invoice types, and make sure again that those solutions are able to capture the right data.
Great point, Jim. Thanks. Next up, we're going to talk about vendor portals and vendor marketplaces. Vendor portals, a lot of companies have established a vendor portal within their environment for just them and their transactions, versus a marketplace, which is something like an Ariba, where you're part of a larger group of customers, and a large group of vendors go back and forth and transact that way. Pros for vendor portal and marketplaces, similar to OCR, they're easy to implement and they're easy to integrate with workflow systems. And they do provide benefits very quickly. The minute you stand up your vendor portal and you get an invoice to come in through a vendor, that's one less invoice that you and your resources are going to have to key. One really great thing about these are that the data capture exception handling is there's none needed, because the vendor's coming in and they're putting in their information and they're doing it according to rules that you've established for your portal and for your marketplace. One benefit for the vendors is that they know that once they hit submit, the invoices are received by you, and typically processing begins within a few minutes of submission. And that's really important for vendors, because a lot of times they send an email offer, they send an invoice in the mail, and they never really know whether you've received it. With the use of vendor portals or marketplaces, that goes away, so the vendors feel better. Lastly, similar to EDI, you get very high data density. Again, you can have these portals interface with your other systems to bring in perhaps PO information. And so the vendor could use a PO flip capability to submit their invoice. Well, when that happens, you have all of that detail in data form that can then be fed over to your workflow systems for matching, so on and so forth. Again, one of the nice things here is there is minimal IT involvement. There are a lot of different portals out there, ICGs included, and when we go in and put these in, there's not a lot of IT involvement that's needed to stand these up. Some of the cons, there is change management for your vendors. They are going to have to do something different. That means that vendor portal and marketplaces aren't going to be used by every vendor. You're not going to get some of your huge vendors to enter and use the portals for invoice submission, but a lot of your medium and small size vendors you can. Change management also comes with training. Vendors are going to have to be trained on how to use the portals. Well, typically you want your portals to be as easy as or simple to use as possible, but still some initial training is going to be needed. And again, along this line, you're going to get pushback from some of the vendors because now they have another portal they're going to have to log into to submit invoices. We really recommend that low volume vendors are encouraged to use self-service platforms. The lower volume vendors, it isn't that hard to go onto the portal and to submit the invoice, especially considering the fact that, as we mentioned, once they hit submit, they know that their invoices are received and processing begins within minutes.
Yeah, one other comment I would make about one of the real benefits of using vendor portals and a capture as a capture tool is that it really has multiple uses, so you can kind of spread that cost. The vendor portal isn't just a capture tool. You can use it for managing disputes. You can use it for invoice inquiry, for your vendors come in and look at the status of a payment, and any number of different things that vendor portals bring to the table. Vendor onboarding, a whole host of other functionality. So if you're standing up a vendor portal, the reality is you can spread some of that cost, and we'll talk a little bit later about the kind of the relative cost per invoice of some of these tools. And the great thing about a vendor portal is it's not just a capture tool. It is a great capture tool, but it can be used for so much more to where you can spread some of that cost over other areas of your operation.
Thanks again, Jim. Our next and final tool is data entry. This is really the manual entry, taking a person looking at the image or the paper and entering that information into a workflow or into an ERP. The pros, there are pros to data entry. There's no technology investment needed. If you're a very low volume business, then perhaps data entry is the best option for you. There's no internal change control. There's no change management for vendors. There's no ongoing support costs because it's very low tech. But the cons are big. It is the most expensive tool from a human resource perspective, and that is the gift that keeps on giving. Along with those lines, and it's the most expensive because it is the least efficient. You're relying on people to capture data consistently and quickly. And it is prone to human error. We've seen it 100 times. Someone can take all the time in the world, but they may not see something on the invoice. They may capture it incorrectly. They may key it incorrectly. It's out there. But again, low volume operations, because they may not find any return on investment on any technology, this may be the best method for them. And that's okay. We want to take a look now at some comparative costs when looking across these tools. And so, when you consider the volume of the operation and the costs, EDI, as we talked about, for those high volume operations, it's the lowest cost because you've got a one-time fixed cost. There's a little bit of ongoing cost to bring the vendors on, but really, because the transaction volume is so high, that cost per transaction is pretty low. When you start to layer in now OCR, there is a technology investment there, but there also is ongoing costs, which is why you see that lower bar is there, and it is longer. I mean, and any tool that you bring in from a technology perspective, the cost is going to be a little bit lower based on if your volume is higher, but still, comparatively speaking, on an ongoing basis, OCR is going to be more expensive than EDI. Sorry about that. Then we layer in the portal. Again, the costs here are representative because in your high volume operation, your portal doesn't require as much ongoing FTE cost, which is why the cost there is a little bit lower than OCR. But then as you move through, you can see that even in the lower volume environments, it is a lower cost than EDI or OCR. Lastly, layering in data entry. You can see here that the overall cost in the low volume environment is lower for data entry, again, because there's no technology here. But then as you kind of move up the scale, the costs go up and up because, again, every single invoice requires a person to do something for it.
Yeah, and a point I would make here, Lynn. So some of you may be wondering, well, that's a very very long line for data entry on the high volume. Cost for invoice, is that really going to vary that much, right? I mean, I can see. Well, the reality is, yes, the total cost is obviously going to be much, much greater just because of the sheer volume and the number of human resources that will be involved in the process. But you do actually add more incremental costs and cost per invoice because the larger that operation requires supervision. There's increased overhead from not only the people, but the resources, the IT resources, the equipment, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot to factor in. So while the total cost for a data entry operation for high volume is extremely high, it is also higher on a cost per invoice basis. Maybe not quite as dramatic as that line might suggest, but higher nonetheless.
Jim, that is a great point, especially the part where, more people equals more overhead. That really does have an impact that a lot of people don't think through. So the question is, where does your operation fit? That's where we come in. As we mentioned earlier, we work with our clients to rank the vendor population. Where do they fall? How many high volume vendors do you have? How many low volume? How many medium? We then look at that and we take a look at the current capture costs and analyze where those costs sit. And also look and see where in your organization other technologies may come in to help out. Once we have that information, we start to look at different options, different tools, and score each of them according to how your vendors fall out and what your data capture needs are and where you want to go. From there, we can then help you decide and come up with a strategy to determine what's going to be best for your organization, what's going to provide you the best ultimate return on investment.
Great, Lynn. When it comes back to really the theme that we started with, one size does not fit all. And now that we've gone through all these options, it's not about just picking that one magic solution. It may be a combination that are key to maximizing your efficiency and savings. It could be one. Chances are, in most operations that we've seen, especially the larger the operation, there's usually a really a variety of solutions, a combination of solutions that really delivers the bang for the buck. This is where ICG can really help you. So let us come in and work with you and help your company find the right solution. Based on those capture needs, based on what we found out from the stratification, from going through that process with you and thinking through that. how ICG is going to do that is we have a comprehensive set of cloud hosted data capture, portal, workflow solutions that really can help any operation save costs and increase efficiency. We've been doing this for many, many years, and we've helped a lot of companies, large and small, really to save a lot of money and increase the efficiency of their operations. So we invite you to go onto our website and look at our solutions page, and you can look through many of the things we discussed today, as well as many others, to see what might fit. And you can see our experience and some of the things we've done. Really, thank you all for coming today and spending some time with us. We hope that you found this informative. We hope you got something out of this. So we do. We're very grateful for your time. Any questions that may have come up, and I know we didn't have a Q&A as part of this, but any questions that did come up as part of this webinar, well, please send those questions to us. You see the email address there, info@icgconsulting.com. And then we'll answer those questions and distribute those questions and answers out to all the attendees on today's webinar. So thank you very much for your time, and we hope to see you soon.